On Wednesday, Russia's Paralympic team will put forward its case to compete in the Rio Games. It's after a probe was initiated over some 35 unnamed positive samples for doping, mentioned in the McLaren report into sporting drug practices in Russia. A Russian delegation will now meet sports chiefs in the German city of Bonn, and a blanket ban is among the possible sanctions for the nation's competitors.
For the accident, I didn't have enough of that sporting character, winner's mood and so on. But after the tragedy, I looked back at my life and realized that now I have to be stronger than ever.
Earlier, I discussed the upcoming meeting with William Whiteman.
This is a team which came in second place during the London 2012 Olympics and won over 100 medals. So it's a very, very strong team. So obviously the main outcome would be what effect would this have on the sort of the value of the medals if this team is not allowed to take part.
When you're talking about the anti-doping code, is there much of a difference between the Olympics and the Paralympics?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, of course, if you take into consideration that certain athletes taking part in the Paralympics would perhaps need to take certain forms of medication. So, this being the case, the World Anti-Doping Agency has allowed for what it defines as a TUE, which basically stands for therapeutic use exemption, which is given in the case of when an athlete is needing to take a certain medication to help them.
Just going back, what triggered the investigation into the Russian Paralympic team then? Well,
I mean, this is as we've been talking about, so this was all triggered by a report which was published by the World Anti-Doping Agency, otherwise known as WADA. The claim that a Moscow anti-doping lab was essentially sort of disappearing or changing results. That was the main accusation. But then this has meant that also, as well as this, 35 unnamed Paralympians are essentially on this list. And because of them, over 200 athletes are now potentially not going to be able to compete.
Not a single name has been mentioned in this report. There is no concrete information. Instead, we're asked to tell what we know and what we don't. The Russian Paralympic Committee is not a police agency. If this report is true, we are victims.
Why is the International Paralympic Committee considering such drastic measures in this case?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, with a blanket ban of all athletes, this is unprecedented when it comes to the Paralympics. So the reason cited by the Paralympics Committee is because, and I quote here, they say the NPC Russia appears unwilling to ensure compliance with and the enforcement of the IPC's anti-doping code within its own national jurisdiction. However, this being the case, if we look at what happened with the Russian Olympic team, the decision there to introduce a blanket ban was overturned.
We cannot deprive an athlete of the human right to be given the opportunity to prove his or her innocence. You cannot punish a human being for the failures of his or her government if he or she is not implicated.
Human rights groups are calling on Britain's Foreign Secretary to condemn what they say is the upcoming illegal execution of 3 men in Saudi Arabia. They were handed death sentences for anti-government protests when they were juveniles, in violation of international law. The kingdom's human rights situation is already heavily criticised by watchdogs. However, the UK has previously shied away from condemning Saudi Arabia's track record. But critics say this is unsurprising, that London turns a blind eye while it cashes in on large arms trade deals with Riyadh. Well, since 2010, Britain has sold nearly £7 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia. Most recently, the shipments included drones, helicopters and other aircraft, as well as various bombs, missiles and armoured vehicles. Human rights groups say some of these weapons have been used in the bombing of Yemen, where Saudi Arabia has been accused of committing war crimes. Former UK Prime Minister David Cameron defended the arms deals, calling them legitimate and right.
Our arms exports are carefully controlled, and we are backing the legitimate government of the Yemen, not least because terrorist attacks planned in the Yemen would have a direct effect on people in our country.
Middle East researcher Catherine Shackdam thinks the UK will keep turning a blind eye to Saudi violations as long as there's big money to be made.
They're going to really try to see whether it could actually play in their favor, and I don't see a scenario where the UK would actually criticize Saudi Arabia, especially when they're just set to make billions and billions of pounds. I know it's very, very sad to say, and it's very disheartening to say, that the life of 3 young boys would not matter when it comes to the UK. And I don't see a situation where the UK will actually, try to fly human rights flag and actually do the right thing, and not just the right thing, but what needs to be done and needs to be said. I don't think that the issue will be addressed, and only because they don't see the point. They don't feel any empathy when it comes to the plight of, religious minorities in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else in that matter in the world.
Right ahead, Boom Bust breaks down the financial headlines. Stay with us if you can.